Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, what's going on? My name's Boit, and it's time to talk tier list. I haven't done one of these in a hot minute, and I thought with Japanese on the horizon, let's give a little bit of a snapshot into where the game is currently. Early on, I did a tier list, and I went kind of in depth into like matchups and things like that as to why I thought things were going which way. And to be honest, at this point, with how much I know now, I probably didn't know a lot back at the start of the game, and the tier lists were kind of all over the place. And to be fair, I probably don't know a whole lot right now, though I do feel like I've got a lot more knowledge now than I did beforehand, and I'd love to share that. I've actually made an Excel spreadsheet on all the matchups in the game at the moment. There's no explanations there, so you're going to have to watch the video to figure it out. But if you want to jump straight into there and sort of see where I feel like matchups are at the moment, you can check that out in the description box below. I'm going to be doing these in order, and I'm going to be popping them through. So first and foremost, we're going to be going for Zeus. Now, I'm going to try and be quick to get through this. But effectively, the way that I've done this is a quick gut feeling on the matchup. I haven't analyzed it super heavily. It's a gut feeling based on my own experience and based on what I've seen other players doing. I'll try and unpack a little bit about why I think that it's kind of the way it is, but nonetheless. Yeah, sorry. Before I continue, the way that the tier list is working is I've done all of the matchups. I've given the score of basically between 50. There's nothing that is too crazy at the moment. It's like kind of 40 to 60. And then I've tallied up the score, and I'm going to pop them into the tier list at the moment. Okay. So Zeus series against Hades. I feel like this is a pretty fair matchup. Let me just pop Zeus where he belongs. Actually, this makes the most sense. So Zeus is going to be in the B tier. So Zeus versus Hades here. This is an equal matchup in my opinion. There's actually quite a lot that Zeus can do. He's got the Hippias, he's got the Centaur. They're not too oppressive against Hades. Hades got a lot of things he can do to defend against it. Zeus has also got the Athena angle. He's got a lot of god powers he can throw at at Hades. Hades can also defend against a lot of stuff. And I think that, like, probably 10 times out of 10, like, the player that is going to have the best game is probably going to find the win there. I think this is a really, really close matchup there. Zeus versus Poseidon. I think that Poseidon takes the edge in this one ever so slightly. It's a 45 for Zeus. Mostly this comes down to the fact that if someone can control those Poseidon cavalry and Hippias really, really well, then it's quite difficult for the Zeus player to actually find advantages. I think a great explanation of why that is actually that Freya video. Freya, the minor god, the one with Garmajuda he plays. If you haven't seen that Athenian League, go check it out. He goes mass cavalry with Valkyrie or something, right? So he's mixing some myth units in, and Zeus Poseidon can do the same thing with Hippias and Centaur, but Poseidon just does that better, so it's very, very hard to match. At the moment, there's kind of two ways for Zeus to play that matchup to get through that early game and then take it into something kind of different. And that would either be to open up with Hippias with Athena, playing defensively and using Restoration to try and help yourself out. You can catch the Centaurs out with the Hippias and snare them up to allow the Heracles to actually kill them. Or you can go mass hoplites and just try and weather the storm against the Hippias, maybe try and catch your opponent with their pants down, picking off a Centaur here or there, but a really, really good Poseidon player probably won't lose any Centaur in that situation. So yeah, it's a little bit tricky, but I do think it's possible, especially going through the Hippias route. I think you have to play a little better than your opponent to win with Zeus, but it's not that much. Then we go Zeus versus Ra. That's 45 for Zeus, so a little bit of an advantage for Ra. I just don't really see the... I do think that Zeus can find a point where it's like, wow, he just wins, right? But I think Ra's got a lot of oomph behind him that just keeps on piling it onto the Zeus, and the Zeus is eventually just going to fall flat. And you can go Hermes and you can go for some Hippias ideas or some cavalry ideas, but mostly it's going to be an Athena angle. I think it's mostly down to skill in this one. It's pretty close. I do give the edge over to Ra, but that might just be my Egyptian bias. I will admit that I'm an Egyptian main from way back, and I think sometimes when I think about Egyptian, it's just influenced a lot by the fact that I do well with Egyptian. But at the moment, I've been playing Random God for the past nearly year. I think I played like the first month or so of Retold. I was playing like main gods. I was playing some some Set and some Hades and things like that early on, and then I said, screw this, I'm going to learn all the gods, and I learned them all, and I started playing random. So yeah, I wouldn't consider myself an Egyptian man at the moment, but there is probably some Egyptian bias there. But I do find that Ra has got a bit of an edge in this matchup, even when I'm playing against Ra, right? The next one is Zeus versus Isis. I think Isis is just really tough to beat with Zeus. Zeus does have Ceasefire to deal with Ancestors Eclipse, but if you go Ceasefire, then you don't get access to the Hoplite or the series of Hoplites, or the Aegis Shield Hoplites, and then Isis can find wins very, very easily. Isis has got the Spearman to make life really challenging, the Anubis Spearman, plus Priest if need be, or she's got like crazy all-ins. She's just got a whole bag of tricks she can throw at Zeus, and I do think if the Isis player is super competent, I don't think that Zeus is gonna have a great time. I think you'd have to pretty heavily outplay, so this is why it's a 40 for this matchup. And then the same too for Set as well, for similar reasons. There's just a whole bunch of tricks that you can throw at Zeus to get him off his game. There are a couple of tricks that Zeus has to create like a sort of equalish game, like for example, bolting the Pharaoh if they're going for like a naked second town center. Most Egyptian players won't do that unless they're super greedy like me. But you'll probably find some edge if you can go like early Heracles plus the Minotaur and bolt a Pharaoh while they're going for a town center. I don't think many Egyptian players are playing that way anymore, especially at the top level, but even lower, I'm starting to see a lot more one town center ideas. Not even just one town center ideas, but like there's the idea of opening with a couple of units and then going for the town center and putting pressure on. Like if you go for a naked town center with Greek in that situation against someone opening the other way, what'll end up happening is those early units are going to push you off food, and you're not going to be able to take advantage of that town center all too easily. So it can be tricky. I'm just going to say it can be tricky, but if you get through it, right? If you get through all these difficult things, I do think this matchup does end up getting a little bit easier on the Zeus side. Like if you get through all of this nonsense, you can kind of find some wins. So there is a way to come back in these games. So I would try. This is one of those matchups where I just would never resign if I've got resources coming in, even if I'm like feeling like it's like 4 versus 2 TCs. I'd still keep fighting and force the Egyptian player to actually push me out of the game. Because if I can survive, then I can bring it back and it can be good. Okay, so this is going to be a long video, I think. We've got Zeus versus Thor, Zeus versus Odin, Zeus versus Loki. I think these are really close to even. Zeus has got a lot of early game pressure that he can put on. He's got restoration. He's got a whole bunch of stuff he can do to force the Norse player to kind of interact with that Athena-ish army. You've also got Hermes Hoplites. So that's going Centaur Hoplite, which is also pretty scary for the Norse players. But the Norse players are in a really good spot here, I think, against Greeks. And with that being said, like you got the speedy hoplites to chase down raiding cavalry with good walls, you're all good. You've got a really strong Greek army that if you can get it into a really nice spot, the Norse player's not going to be able to kill you, but they can force you to take some bad trades as well. I think it's a really, really even matchup. I think it's very much skill-based in a big way. The next matchup here is Freya, and I think that this one's incredibly challenging. For Zeus. It might even be more challenging than the Isis Set matchup, but I put this one as 40. So yeah, Freya's just a monster of a god, I think, at the moment. Yeah, Zeus has got building takedown capabilities, but if you want to use those with the hoplites, you have to go next to a town center, and a Ghoul and Burster comes through, and then all of a sudden the Freya player gets like a whole bunch of free value, and they're able to push themselves even further in front. So yeah, you got to play a really tricky game here with Zeus. There was some ideas I had against Norse, like specifically like with the Thor Dwarven Mayan thing. I used to think you could kind of go for some early Minotaur pressure into town centers, but at this point there's just so many Herster that can come out early on for the Freya player that you don't get that value, and you can't stack on that pressure and then take a big economic advantage after it. I just don't see the angle at the moment against Freya. If the Freya player has a half decent map, I mean, if there is like a good map for the Zeus, you can play some really, really nice one town center containment ideas. Get your Pegasus out, make sure you prevent any sort of Asgardian Bastion coming up onto a second gold mine. That being said, you can pressure the Asgardian Bastion with some restoration stuff. So that's a thing as well. Now we come over to Kronos. I think this is 55. I think Zeus has got a bit of an advantage against Kronos. A lot of this comes down to the fact that Kronos doesn't have any speed boosting stuff. So you can outplay pretty hard with hoplites. So 4.9 speed running around the map and getting some advantage early on. The Kronos player is not going to want to really engage you in the classical age unless he's going in for Prometheans or for automatons, of which can be somewhat of a problem. Now, if the map is favoring a two-town center play for the Zeus player and then the Kronos player decides to go for automatons, then you do have some town center sacking plays into fast heroics or even fast mythics that can result in you getting out Odysseus or Bellerophon, which can help you tame the automaton mass. So yeah, it's there's lots of ways through this matchup. I think it's tricky for the Kronos, but Kronos can play a good game and win here. It's not the end of the world. It's pretty close, but I do give the edge to Zeus. And now we got Zeus versus Uranus. I think this one's really close. Surprise, surprise. Uranus has got Oceanus, has got Mermillos. They're really, really good. Zeus probably can play one town center here against the Uranus one town center, and it probably works. Zeus can probably go 2 TC and sort of try and play a defensive game, but then the Uranus player gets full map control, gets to start abusing those sky passages. So yeah, it's a tricky matchup for sure. I think skill plays a big role here, and I think you'll find the more skillful player wins on that one more often than not. And then you got Zeus versus Gaia. I got this at 55. While Gaia does have speed because of the Lush and Gaia does have Oceanus, I think that Gaia is missing things like Shockwave and Chaos in this matchup. Sure, she's got access to Rhea, and she probably wins the late game, to be completely honest about it, if you get there. The reason why she probably wins the late game is she's got Super Fanatics, she's got Super Mermillos, she's got the Super Trade Route, which can help a ton with the Lush Highway. And yeah, I think she can make it. I think she can weather the storm against that Bellerophon and have a good game in the late game if she can get there. But I do think Zeus has got the edge here most of the time. Next is Fushi. Fushi I just think is better than Zeus. It's like a 40 for Zeus, so heavily favored for Fushi. I don't really know what you're supposed to do to beat this Fushi god at the moment with Zeus. I don't have anything. Try and play a good game. You have to run into Fire Archers, which kill off your hoplites. You have to run into Dow Swordsman, or you have to run into the speedy Cav that are going to be able to raid you into the ground, depending on which way the Fushi player plays. He's also got Najar, which completely owns your Heracles early on. So if he decides to go one town center and you go 2 town centers, say for the Zeus, then you're going to be under a lot of pressure. And you're probably going to lose buildings. It's really, really tough to defend the 2 TC with 2 TC versus Fushi. It's really, really tough to punish 2 TC Fushi as well, or whatever. It's just a tough matchup. Next one is Nuwa, which I think is a little bit closer. It's 45. I think Nuwa's got a bit of an edge on Zeus, but it's more skillful. I think skillful is probably the wrong word. It's just closer. I think Zeus has got a lot of options he can go for here and find some wins. The biggest pain is the fact that you probably need to lock in a really, really crisp sort of timing to crack Nuwa, because Nuwa is going to go for some. If Nuwa decides to go for Earthwall, she's playing some sort of uninteractive sort of gameplay where she'll just sit there and she'll try and get to her power spike as fast as possible. Whereas Zeus, you've actually got some edge early on. So you want to try and find some edge there. But if that's not there, then you have to figure out where the next edge you've got to try and force some damage somewhere. Not exactly sure, but I think there's some stuff. They got some underworld ideas. You got some bronze ideas to sort of break through that. And if Nuwa does decide to go for the one town center ideas, it's a little less oppressive than, say, Fushi, because there's no Najar there. So yeah, I think it is Nuwa favored, but it's close. And then we got Shenong, and Shenong is, well, look, you're on a timer against Shenong. I think most gods are on a timer against Shenong. He's just so good in the late game. He's got he's got the super Dow with, yeah, he's just got super units. They're really, really strong. If Shenong gets there, doesn't matter if you're in front by 10,000 resources, you're probably not going to be able to beat that army. Plus, you do have a bolt to immediately bolt the hero on repeat. I would actually do that. That's super worth it. Just bolt that Wenzhong out of the game. It's worth it every single time. Up until probably like 100 favor or something. So you can probably kill off about 20 of them. But yeah, if the units were a little bit less strong in the late game, I think Zeus would be okay here, similar to Noir. But yeah, I don't really see it, because he can also do the how-to thing and put an earth wall down, and then you're just sort of trying to break him. Anyways, that's a long one. Let's go to Hades. We're going to skip over the Zeus matchup and jump straight in. We've got Zeus here and Hades are very, very close. I'm putting him just behind Zeus. He is just behind Zeus. There you go. So he's got a problem matchup against Poseidon, much more than Zeus does. He doesn't have access to Hermes, and he doesn't have the faster hoplites. So he just hurts. It's a really, really tough matchup, I'd say, for Hades against Poseidon. I got him at a 40. Against Ra, I think he does a little bit better against Ra than Zeus does. He's got the extra range on the Peltas, so he can deal with chariots a bit easier. He's got Artemis as well in the late game, so you can make those plague of shafts of plague arrows, and all around I just think he's like a pretty good god against Ra. It's close. It's a 50. Then we've got Isis. This is a 45. I think that you can win here with Hades. This is a matchup where your goal as Hades is actually just to live, and Isis will fall off. Isis will fall off here. And you've got all the tools to live, because you've got Plenty Vault, you've got Vaults of Erebus and things like that in the lake, in like the Mythic Age. The general goal here, I think, for Hades is you don't get tricked into going Mythic Age. You want to stay Heroic Age until you have full bronze, full heavy, and you've got your gold mines sorted, and you've maybe even started a small trade route. Because even if the Isis player is just pumping into you, you just got to keep fighting it out and try and survive. That's the general goal. Then we've got Set, which is another 45. Same deal. I think Set, however, maybe is a little bit more tricky than Isis, but I didn't want to make it any more difficult. It's probably pretty close, but Set's got Sekhmet, so access to some catapults a little earlier. So it's just the siege starts earlier, which means you've got a harder time to sort of hold. But Set does have no prosperity, and that does slow him down a bit as well, even though his buildings are a little bit cheaper. But anyways, next one is Thor. I think Thor's got the advantage here as well. He got 45 for Thor. And Odin and Loki and Freya. These are all really, really good. Freya, I put him actually at 35. This is the only one that is that crazy for another god there. But basically, all the Norse gods, I think this is just a tough matchup for Hades. You probably have to go Ares in this matchup. You're probably looking for a nice, healthy defense, making towers, making sure that you can lock the map up and slow the game down. That's your general goal, I would say. And if you can do that, then and the Norse player doesn't really read the situation correctly, doesn't really know what to do, you can find wins. But yeah, it's a tricky one for sure. Freya, I don't really know if there's much you can. I haven't yet to work out what to do here. The reason is because you're a defensive god with Hades, right? And you can play offensive. You can go Ares. Ares is probably your best bet, but even then, you're playing into Gullinbursti and things like that. And while your opponent can make a mistake and use a poor Gullinbursti, or get caught out with a Asgardian Bastion getting pestilenced and getting caught out there, or not having enough heroes out to deal with some Cyclops. Like, these are all mistakes, right, that the Freya player can make. And you can find wins there. It's just a difficult one. It really is. I've seen Freya players losing, but I think this matchup is a matchup I look at. I'm like, well, I know I'm not going to have any trouble here. Next one, we got Kronos, Uranus, and Gaia. I've got Kronos and Uranus at 50. I think these Atlantean gods are actually completely fine into Uranus right now. Sorry, into Hades right now. And same for Hades into these gods. I think it's a really, really close matchup. I think that there's lots of things that can go wrong. Both players can boom. One player can go aggressive and try and make something happen. Other player can boom and get contained and things like that, and then they can try and push out and things like that. But yeah, I think it's a really, really close matchup. And then Gaia, I've got at 55. For Hades, Hades got a bit of an advantage here, I'd say. The difference between Cronus and Uranus and Gaia, it mostly comes down to Valor or Prometheus, having access to Prometheus. You do have Oceanus here as well, but most of the time, if you're going Oceanus, it's going to be for the aggressive gameplay, which Gaia's not so good at. Uranus is perfectly fine to go Oceanus and Shockwave and be aggressive early on and then go into town centers. But Gaia doesn't really work out that well because your speed on the Lush, you can't use that to harass your opponent. You're using that to sort of defend. And it just ends up kind of being a little lackluster. That being said, you can still find wins here. Things like the Contarius raids and things like that in the Heroic Age can definitely open the game up a bit. But yeah, slight edge for Gaia. Slight edge for Hades. I think Gaia's okay here, but slight edge for Hades. Got to give him a win where he has them. And then we got Fushi, which is 45, and Shenong, which is 45, but Nuar is 50. So the reason why Fushi and Shenong are 45 is pretty much just because they both win the late game against this god, Hades. Against Nuar, it's really close. I think this is a really close matchup. It's tough to kill off the Hades army as Nuar. You don't really have any fantastic timings to win, and it ends up becoming like a bit of a grind. This is going to be one of those matchups that if it plays out enough, you're probably going to find it going 30, 40, 50 minutes a lot of the time if both players are playing really, really high level. But yeah, so in the end, he does end up as a bit of a B tier here. Next one is going to be Poseidon. So Poseidon is floating in the A tier right now. My honest opinion of Poseidon is he's probably the easiest god to gain elo with. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean he's the best god, and you're going to find yourself hitting a level where you're able to win against certain players. Like say you get to like 1600, you're able to win against a lot of players without Poseidon. But if you were to swap into any of the other gods that you're losing against, you'd probably drop down 200 rating points. Because this god, he is just that easy. Honestly, you open up with Hippias, you go raid, happy days, makes your opponent panic while you're fully aware of what's going on. You put enough games in to this. Obviously, it takes some skill to be able to raid and things like that. But yeah, once you get that down, yeah, it's this is probably the most simple god. Maybe not the easiest, but the most simplest, if that makes any sense. Anyways, again, we've already done Zeus and Hades. So on the flip side, so we'll move over here against Ra. I think there is an advantage for Poseidon at 55. He just puts a lot of pressure on. You kind of have to go for some spearmen early on for Ra, which you don't really want to do. You actually want to go into camel riders if you can. If I can naked rush to camel riders and get them out, then I'm actually fine here with Ra. But Poseidon is not going to allow that. He's going to go put some pressure on early, then grab his talent centers. Very rarely will he just drop a second talent center and play that way. One idea I had before the villager changed, so I'm not 100% sure if it works anymore, I have to run it, is like a three priest town center grab, naked town center grab, which should allow me to heal my villagers while I'm getting the town center up, but I'm yet to try it. So if it does work, I think I still have to go into barracks afterwards anyways. I can't get a naked fast heroic off against those Hippias. Against Isis and Set, Isis is at 45 for Poseidon and Set is at 40. So Set's got the biggest advantage versus Poseidon because he's got the speedy spearmen and his priests have got Nephthys. Isis has got Nephthys as well with Spearman and Anubis. So it's just the speedy Spearman that's differentiating this, that helps out Set a ton. But Set also has access to animals early on. So there's a lot of really, really good maps for Set that he can utilize those animals to help him out early on. But yeah, it's close. I think that, yeah, Set's a little bit better. I think Poseidon is a really good god against Isis and Set. But it's difficult for the Isis and the Set player for sure. They have to play well, but it's favored for them in a big way if they play this matchup in a certain way. And I think maybe if Poseidon player is a little creative, it could change a little bit. Now, note I'm like talking. Maybe this is a bit late. I'm talking my own experience, right? But inside of my own experience, I don't play every single strategy. I try to play a variety of strategies all the time. So I'm definitely missing some stuff. So there's probably something that'll come along and be like, oh, actually, no, that thing's possible. That's really tough to kill. Maybe this flips this thing on its head. Anyways, we've got Thor. I think this is a very close matchup. for Poseidon, you get early pressure with Centaur and Hippias, and then you can play a nice game of get to the heroic age, so you unlock the Paspist and Prodromus and things like that. Or you can go mass Hippias, Centaur, and just run them off the field. But I think it's very, very close. Against Odin, I think Odin's got the edge here, 45 to 55. So Poseidon's was losing this one, 45 to 55. Just on the fact that Odin's got that extra boosted food. He's advancing quick. He's going to put some pressure on. You're not going to be able to get any early game pressure onto the Odin, so he's going to be fine. And then you're just playing a weird game, right? There is one angle for Poseidon on a very defensive map, like where you can just go for Ares, grab a second town center, and play a boomy game. And do things like Hades does, like place towers down, get chronolations, put walls down, and play very, 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 very defensively. And try and grab town centers and things like that. And if you can't grab a town center, maybe even putting a village center down. Like a third village center, like your third town. Anyways, that's neither here nor there. And then we got Loki, which I also think is a little bit challenging for Poseidon. Reason being is, this is 45, by the way. Reason being is the Loki player can go Hersa Herdman. And this completely counters Hippias Centaur. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean anything other than the fact that the Poseidon player now has to adapt, and in an adaptation that makes things a little bit more tricky. So, yeah, the opening thing sort of butts its head, and then you adapt. I think I think the better player wins this one more often than not, but yeah, it's a little bit more tricky for Poseidon. After this one, I got Freya as 45. I think this one's a little bit closer for Poseidon than the other Greek gods, just on the fact that you got the Hippias. Speedy Hippias, running around, causing problems, and you've also got Centaur, and you've also got the speed to get to wherever a potential Asgardian Bastion gets thrown down. That being said, I still think that this matchup is Freya favored on the fact that if the Freya player manages to expand and doesn't die, in other words, if they don't get outplayed, the game's probably going late game. And while Poseidon's got a decent late game as well, with Artemis and Militia and the Polyphemus and things like that, I think Freya will outshine there most of the time with the hill fort spammage. Following this one, we've got the Kronos. I have this one favoring Poseidon. Probably makes sense. He doesn't have access to Oceanus. Oceanus is the big hurdle for Poseidon. You have to actually adapt quite a bit. I don't have it in me, as I look at Uranus and Gaia, I don't have it in me to put Uranus or Gaia above Poseidon, just on the fact that with adaptation and with good play with Poseidon, I don't see it. I think it's a close matchup. But you have to work. Maybe you have to work a little harder. But I don't see it's working enough. I don't see it as you working hard enough that it would be classified as it's just easier for the other gods. I don't think that's true. So they're both equal. And then we jump over to Fuxi, Nuwa, and Shenong. And Fuxi and Shenong are at a 40. So these are difficult matchups. And the reason is mostly down to Chi Yo, which has got those halberdiers, Master of Weaponry. Can't build Hippias into them. You just can't. If you are going to try and spam Hippias, they will all die. You're not going to get raids off. You're going to get caught. You're going to lose the Hippias. You have to do something else. There are ways through this. For example, you get the pressure on, grab your talents in, you get to the heroic age, get your Paspis out and Peltas and things like that. If you can like lock the Fuxi and Shenong sort of in one place, then sure, you can find some wins. But I think that this is the Poseidon player outshining more often than not, or the other two just failing. And then you got Nuwa, which I think is a 50-50, because you don't have Chi-Yo. I think it's pretty close. Anyways, let's keep going. We're up now to Ra, as this is an insanely long video already. Ra is in my A tier and is slightly above Poseidon. Slightly above Poseidon. So we've already talked about Zeus, Hades, Poseidon. Recap is 55, 50, 45 for Ra. So slightly winning, slightly even, and slightly losing. Slightly even. And then losing against Isis, losing against Set, 45 and 40. I think Set's a little bit better in the Egyptian mirror because you can go open some spearmen. And with them being fast, it means the set's on the offensive, and set's going to be locking the Ra player in their base, removing vision. And what's the Ra player going to do? Has to get some axemen out or something to defend. And then from there, it's just going to be sort of like dominoes falling over. And Isis, on the other hand, has got like a million different tricks she can throw at Ra to kill her. But if Ra survives to the end, Ra can win against Isis. Against Set, I don't see Ra winning because Horror Spearmen come on board, and then you can't even make your... you really shouldn't be able to make those Migdol units work all too well. Very tough. You're going to have to go for a mix of Migdol and Barracks, and that probably favors Set, in my opinion. Onwards and upwards, we've got the Norse gods, which I've got Thor, Odin, and Loki all at 55. So advantage for Ra. It's kind of close at the moment. I think of the Egyptian gods, I think Ra is the one that's kind of the closest. Reason being is because you don't have Anubis. I think Anubis, with that boost onto the Serpent Spear, onto the Spearman, and also Plague of Serpents, changes things. But I think this is still favoring Ra. Ra's got the Bast, Sphinx with Classical Fight, which is really tough to defend against. Though I do think it's getting closer and closer. I think Norse players are getting a lot better. I played one game recently where an Odin player was dropping towers down on their second gold mine. I was like, hang on, I can't attack this. Maybe I could have and I should have, but I didn't try. But I felt like I couldn't attack it. He had his army there. He had a couple of towers there. And I was like, that's not on. So I went for a little something else, and we had a nice scrappy game and did end up winning, which is mostly what ends up happening. Is even if you get through the craziness of the Egyptian, then you still have to deal with the fact that the Egyptian army is built to counter the Norse army for whatever reason. And then we got Freya against Ra. I think this is equal. I've lost this matchup against Kavoth a few times, but I think that's mostly just skill. I think I can win this one. I think it's quite close. I don't really have any comments on this other than it's mostly a boom war. So you're not going to get a huge amount of value out of Ghoul and Bursty. Sure, there's going to be a Tempest Ghoul and Bursty combo coming at you, but you just sack that position, retreat up a bit, and then rebuild and push back in it, and you're fine. Next one is Kronos. This is advantage for Kronos. My gut said this is advantage for Kronos. I think the reason I put this here is just because you're going to get bullied a little bit early on. Oh, no. This is Prometheus. That's right. So my gut here is actually that you're going to get bullied in the heroic age. So you have to actually get some stuff done in the classical age. And then you're playing like either a 1 town center classical fight versus a 2 town center Kronos. And the Kronos player can defend that with Prometheus to help out. Or you're playing a 2 town center versus 2 town center sort of situation where the Kronos player is going to hit a big timing on you. And that's actually similar with Uranus as well, but Uranus can compete a little bit better than Kronos can because of Shockwave. Though Deconstruction is there as well to break through some positions, so it's a little bit of a muchness. So they're both at 45, slightly favoring the Atlanteans there, surprisingly. And then I actually think that Ra is beating Gaia, and mostly that's because there's no Prometheus there. While you do have the economic upgrades that you can get earlier on, I don't think that matters enough. And you do have Oceanus, but again, classical fights are good. So I don't think that matters enough. Yeah. Anyways, that's my opinion there. Okay, so we got Fuxi, Nuwa, Shenong, and I think this is kind of close. Fuxi and Shenong are a little bit favored, so 45 there, and Nuwa is at 50. The reason why Fuxi and Shenong have got the advantage is mostly late game wise. I don't think Ra comes out there, so she has to do some stuff. She has to find some advantage. I just don't think the advantages are quite there. Moving on to the next one, we've got Isis, and this is everyone's god to hate at the moment. This is S tier, and we've got 55 or 60 for Zeus. We've already done all these. Come over here to Set, kind of equal. I don't need to talk much about that. I think it is kind of equal. I think skill won out there 9 times out of 10. Against the Norses, it's tough. Even if you get through all the madness, then you still have to deal with Horus shenanigans in the late game, which is also very, very tough there. Even Freya has got some troubles here, I'd say, which is a rare thing for Freya to have troubles. But yeah, I think Freya's got troubles. I don't really, there's not really much to talk about here. I think it's just tough to defend what Isis throws at you. She's got the Ancestors Eclipse angle. She's got the Anubis Spearman angle. She's got the Anubis Hathor Sobek angle, making Pitsukos as well if you really want to go that way. She's also got Son of Osiris, so if you want to go down myth units, she's got that little big endgame boss that's going to just make your life miserable. And she's got some insanely good Major God perks that just make things tough. That being said, I do think that of all these gods here, Uranus is actually doing okay against Isis. Reason being is if the Spearmen do come, you're going to be able to stall with Karabalistar and a couple of units and get to the heroic age and go for Satyr, and then you're okay. And if the Isis player goes the other angle, which is going for Migdol units, then you can go in for counterbarracks units like Catapultes and Terma and things like that, and you can kind of try and deal with those that way. So that's Uranus. And Gaia is kind of similar, but without Shockwave, kind of changes without Prometheus as well. You cover less angles. Prometheus is really good against the classical fighting Isis, and Oceanus is really good against the Migdol stuff. But you don't know what your opponent's doing until they do it, and they can decide to do X or Y based on what you pick anyways. So it's favoring the Egyptian there. And then against the Chinese, I got 50, 55 for Nuar and 50 for Shenong. So kind of close for the Fuxi Shenong. So, I mean, of all the gods, I do think that the Fuxi Shenong sort of powerhouse of China are the gods to kind of beat. And Isis has gone close against them. I think it's close. Which does surprise me that my gut is telling me this. This is like one of those things where the top players, they just go, I'm going to go Isis. I'm going to prioritize Isis, right? Like you've got Kavoth doing this. You've got Matador doing this. You got Mister doing this. Recon doing this. Yeah, I think that Fuxi and Shenong are like up there for sure. So I wouldn't be surprised to see people prioritizing them if no balance were to change. If more games get played. That's my take on that. Anyways, now we go on to Set, and surprisingly, I actually think Set is the strongest god right now. I think that Set actually takes the crown from Isis. Not necessarily for anything other than Set's just more oppressive against certain gods. I think it's all kind of similar. Like Set beats Zeus. Like we've already done all that, but when we come over onto the Norse, Set dominates Thor 60 and Isis was 55. Dominates Odin in a similar way that Isis does. Dominates Loki and does fine against Freya and beats Kronos. Everything else is kind of exactly the same. So it's really just that Set is doing a little bit better against the Norse than Isis is, and Isis is already winning. So it's close enough that they're basically on the same, but I put Set just that little bit in front. We're jumping ahead here. I don't want to go too much into it. I've kind of already touched on that enough. So let's get into Thor, skipping over the Greek and Egyptians because we've kind of already touched on that. So Thor is sitting in the A tier, and I would put Thor above Ra at the moment. Come on, get in there. Thor above Ra. And the reason is well, he has more score. Only a tiny bit more score. So Thor kind of losing versus Odin by a tiny bit. I think that all these Norse wars are very, very skill matchup. I don't think there's much in it. Thor and Loki are very even. Thor and Freya, I think, are very even. Funnily enough, even after all my hate, all the DLC privilege that Freya gets, I still think that's close. I think Thor is fantastic into Kronos. I think that Thor is fantastic into Uranus and Gaia. 60 into Kronos and 55 into Uranus and Gaia. The important thing to remember when playing against Kronos as Thor is to not do the Dwarven Army build. Advance quick, get early Herser out, and just play a nice game. You can throw the army out later. You don't need to grade out anything early. Just play a nice early game, defend yourself, and play the game, and you'll find yourself in nice positions to win. Against Fuxi and Shenong, got the Chio. You want to go for Seti, and you've got some Herso that can help actually raid. Now, while your opponent's going to have access to things like fire archers and stuff that you're not going to be wanting to build raiding cavalry into, you can kind of play around it. So it is skill dependent. I do think that Fushi and Shenong got the advantage there, but you got those Hersa, you've got those 4-city Hersa. They're good. You can get to Huskal and then you can have a good game. If you can get there, it can be pretty good. It can be close. That being said, you also have to deal with those heroes that come through later. And Nuwa, I actually think is equal as well, by the way, for Thor. I think that's a very, very fun matchup, Thor versus Nuwa. They're both kind of defensive eco powerhouses, and it ends up being quite fun. Next one is Odin. Hopefully you guys are still with me. Odin is in the A tier and is sitting slightly above Thor, very, very slightly. And we jump to Odin versus Loki, which is favoring Odin against Freya. I think it's kind of equal. Reason why Odin's beating on Loki is just for that tempo. I do think that if Loki can survive, it kind of gets tricky for Odin, but I don't think that you're going to find too many situations where you do end up surviving. Though that being said, maybe, just maybe, we're seeing a meta shift into Heimdall being more of a threat, and maybe that might mean that Loki's going to be doing a bit better there, but Freya is so good at the moment, so I don't know. Same for Freya. Okay, so we got Kronos, which is 55 for Odin. I think that Uranus is fine into Odin at the moment. I might bite my bum on that one, and that might be wrong. But I think Odin and Uranus is quite close. I think the reason here is mostly because Uranus has got those Murmillos, has got that Caraballister, and has got the Sky Passage stuff. So you can't really do a whole lot early on with Odin. So you have to play kind of a contained game where you're preventing citizens from sneaking places and getting Sky Passages and moving across the map, right? And you can't really do any damage because if you move into where the Sky Passages are, you're going to lose any sort of infantry that are going in there because the Caraballists pop out and snipe you. So it does end up being a very, very, very skillful game. And maybe, just maybe, Odin is okay there. But then maybe, just maybe, Uranus is also okay there. So that's why I think it's about 50-50. Anyways, next one is Gaia. I think this is favoring Odin by 55. I think it's pretty close. Most of the time, so long as my base isn't too spread out, like, for example, if I'm playing on an Oasis and I've got Hunt on one side of the map and I have Goldmine that I need to defend on the other side of the map, sure, I'm going to get spread thin and I'm not going to be able to defend everything. But so long as everything is kind of compact enough, I can defend and I can play with Gaia. But Odin does have the advantage there. Then we got Fushi and Shenong. We got the Chiol problem here. This, not to complain any much about balance, but I do think this is fixable, and it wouldn't be a problem. I was actually playing a game today where I actively did not grab Master of Weaponry, and this was against top 10 player, and it was a really fun game. So, in other words, Master of Weaponry is a problem. Anyways, I'm gonna leave it there, and we're just gonna keep going. We've got 55 for Nuwa. I think Odin does fine into Nuwa. Maybe it's closer to 50-50, but I think Odin is nice into Nuwa. Slight advantage. He's got those Jarls, which are really, really good. And you probably don't want to go Hal 2 in this matchup against Odin because you've got Forest Fire to break the Earth Wall. So you probably have to go for Gen Nu, and that's an interesting matchup in of itself because you got those chillin that can't really get picked off by Hersa, but if you position the Hersa well and you get some raiding cavalry, get some snaring going on, you can kind of snipe them. And then that's it. So that's Odin, and now we're up to Loki, who is floating in just behind Ra. Actually equal with Ra. No, equal. I can't put him equal, but equal with Ra. So yeah, this is, if we jump straight to where we're up to, so against Freya, losing against Freya, I think Freya does get scared a little bit by a whole bunch of myth units and flaming weapons, and a whole bunch of pressure, but realistically, I think that Freya should be able to hold that, and then you have to, it'll be whether or not the Loki player can crack the Freya. Onwards and upwards, you got Kronos against Loki, which I do have a favoring Loki, similar to Odin and Thor. You just have to advance faster. So the main build order with Norse is actually, it's something like 4 dwarves which ends up being around about a 4-minute plus advance. I think it might even be 4 minute 18 seconds. Don't do that. 3 dwarfs max and advance. So 15 pop is the absolute latest you want to advance against Kronos. So I actually skip my house now in that matchup, and I'm doing completely fine there. Anyways, against Uranus, I think it's a similar thing to Odin. I think this is close for similar reasons. I don't have to rehash that. Gaia, I think Loki is favored here, but I do think it's scary because you can't get as aggressive against Gaia with Loki as you used to in Legacy because of the Lush and the Murmillos with the Bite of the Shark. So there is some problems here. You can go wrong really easily with Loki, so you'd have to play really well. Fushi and Shenong, just similar to Thor because you've got access to Hall of Thanes. You can find some advantages here if the Chinese players aren't playing too well. And I do think that there is a slight advantage for Loki against Nuar as well. Ever so slight, so 55. Moving on. Let me explain why. The main reason I think here is Njord and your ability to push through everything. Herdman to break through any sort of the super white horse cavalry raids. And you're probably going to be able to knock the China player out more often than not before they get this wild late game with all the white, with all the cavalry, what are they called? Tiger cavalry. Okay, now we got Freya. And Freya, should be no surprise, is sitting in S tier. But is sitting below Isis and Set. So in S tier. Freya, we've already done a whole bunch of these, so we're basically just up to the Atlanteans. So Freya versus Kronos, in a similar way to Thor. Don't go for the early economic upgrades. Grab them later. There's no rush. Just don't die here against the Kronos rush. That's the only thing you're really scared about. That being said, even against Kronos Rush, you've got Gullen Bursty, so you can probably still get these upgrades. But why would you bother when you can just go quick to the classical age, get them later, and get your Hersa out so you don't lose the game or risk losing the game or risk wasting Gullen Bursty and then losing the game later, right? So, yeah, I got this 55 for Freya. There are some problems that Freya can run into. So, for example, deconstruction on a hill fort can be painful. So you do have to be a little bit careful. I tend to put my Asgardian Bastion nice and safe against Atlanteans. I don't use it to protect a gold mine. I don't need to. You're going to get Huskarl out. That'll deal with any sort of Carabalist or Terma, and then I'll just slowly start building and pushing out my base, and things go really, really bad. I got this as a 60 for Uranus and Gaia, so Freya's winning this really, really hard. Mostly the reason is they can't really do anything against Freya, and Freya doesn't need to do anything back against them. So where that problem was, where you could kind of sit there in your Sky Passage, wait for the units to come and then pop out with Carabalist and snipe a whole bunch of units, Freya doesn't care. I'm just going to sit there, grab my town center, move forward, play fundamentals, wall up places, get some more hill forts going, and eventually win the game. So yeah, that it's a tough matchup for them. I'm not lying. That's a tough matchup. Against Fushi and Shenong, actually, this is quite close. I got this at 50-50. I could be wrong, and this could be favoring the Chinese a little bit, which would actually, if this was favoring, this would knock Freya down. Actually, probably still in the S tier, but would be like floating off the S tier a little bit. But yeah, I think it's quite close. I do think that Freya is favored against Noir though, ever so slightly. But yeah, close one for those guys. I think the reason why it's mostly close is because even if Freya gets everything that he wants, which is just like getting town centers, like the Chinese players aren't really going to care that much. Shenong wants to get late game anyways. And Fushi also, he's just like, he's going to rush. He's going to probably hit you with the timing in the Mythic Age, where it's not going to matter too much about Gullen Bursty, Tempest, and mass hill fort stuff. It's going to be tough to deal with all those things. So it's both players are kind of happy to play that sort of a game. I don't really know who comes out on top of that though. Anyways, let's move on. We got Kronos here. Kronos is unfortunately our first C tier god. And when I put him in C tier, I don't know. I don't really feel like he's garbage. But when I play against, say, the S tiers, I feel like he's really tough. If I'm playing against an A tiers or the B tiers, obviously, like it's kind of close, you know. Maybe there's a terrible matchup here or there, but you know, it's pretty close most of the time, and I do feel like if I play well, I'm winning games. So, anyways, against Uranus, he is struggling a tiny bit. I think Uranus has got the edge there, but there are some ways that things can go pretty poorly for Uranus. So you've got a lot of options with Kronos. You've also got deconstruction on Sky Passages to catch him out and things like that. Against Gaia, it's similar, and mostly this is just because of Oceanus as well with Uranus and Gaia, because they get the Super Murmillo. Gaia's also got Super Murmillo plus Super Rhea Murmillo, so the infantry just go to the moon. Uranus says don't go to the moon, but he's already got the Speedy Murmillo, so he's got Oceanus plus Speedy, so that's also really, really good. Anyways, against Fushi, advantage. You can't classical fight against Fushi with Atlantean period. I've tried it. It doesn't work. You are just going to lose. So you have to play a 2TC game and play a little bit more reactive. Now, you can defend 2TC versus 1TC as Kronos. You can actually... I lied there a little bit. You can go for a Death Ball automaton idea against Nuwa and Shenong. You cannot go for it against Fushi because of Neja. So against Fushi, this is probably... I do have partial to me to knock Fushi, knock this match up to 40, but I think this is closer than this. You do have destroyers. They're a good option against China if you can get to them. So yeah, any options to get little bits of raids, but not going too heavy in the classical age, you get to the heroic age and enjoy that with the destroyers and things like that. And it's the same for Nuwa and Shenong. It's all kind of similar. So if you can get that happening, it's good. And now we move into Uranus. And Uranus is sitting in the B tier and is actually sitting above both Zeus and Hades. I so want to put Uranus in the A tier. Oh, he's so close. He's like 15. No, he's 25 points below. He's basically A tier. Whatever. I'll leave him in the B tier. He's basically A tier. Anyways, to jump over, we've already done a lot of what Uranus has. Against Gaia, it's very close. I think it's a really, really fun matchup. Uranus versus Gaia, very, very close. And against Fushi, Nuwa, and Shenong, losing all of those pretty hard against Fushi and Shenong because you can't classical fight, which means you're losing a lot of the Murmillo pressure. In fact, I would probably go for classical fights with Fushi nearly every single time versus Uranus at the moment. I feel like it'd be just very tough for the Uranus. Though he does have Shockwave and things like that. But anyways, he has to figure out a way there through that. And Nuwa has the Earth Wall to shut you down early on with some Fire Archers and can sort of control the game a little bit. That does give some options over to the Uranus, but I think he will lose in that late game, which the Nuwa is going to win, and same with Shenong. It might take like 25 minutes to win the game, but, you know, you're going to win it. And then we got Gaia, who is the lowest ranked god at the moment at C tier with a score of 600 and... What was it? Was she 670? You do the math. But Gaia, we've got a couple of matchups to go through, which is just the Chinese ones. She doesn't have Prometheus. So her two town center ideas are kind of a little bit shocking. The reason why two town center ideas are so good with Atlantean, with Prometheus, is because you can heroize the villagers and it boosts your economy up quite considerably because of theft of fire and allows you to hit a big timing. What Gaia can do is she can go for two town center and then get Bowsaw or rush straight for tier 3 upgrades and then try and hit something with that. But yeah, it doesn't work out too well in my experience. I haven't figured anything out for Gaia. I think Nuwa is playable, and that's mostly down to playing for destroyers and things like that, because Nuwa is probably not going to go too aggressive in the classical fight. Doesn't have access to Chi Yol, but does have access to Gen Nu. So if she wants to do Gen Nu, that's going to be tricky. But anyways, and then we got Fushi, who is currently in the S tier and tied with Isis. And the only matchups to go through with Fushi is against Nuwa and Shenong, of which I think Fushi is beating Nuwa, and I think Fushi is going equal with Shenong. And the reason why Fushi is winning this is because I think that Chiyo is the correct choice in this matchup, and Nuwa doesn't have Chiyo. And that mostly comes down to the arts as being a little bit difficult to deal with, and you can make a couple of those and just contain your opponent. And then we've got Nuwa, who is sitting in the A tier at 740 between Thor and Ra. Basically equal with Thor, but we'll put her here. And yeah, so same thing against Shenong. I got this one equal. Why is that equal? That shouldn't be equal. I think Shenong wins this matchup. Yeah, no, I'm going to change that. I'm going to change that. Yeah, so Shenong's winning this matchup because of the Yatsa and the stronger late game. And then finally, that leaves Shenong, who is equal with Fushi and Isis, up the top in the S tier. Ridiculously long tier list video here. I hope you enjoy. Make sure you check out the whatever it's called, the Excel spreadsheet. Let me know what you think of my like ranking system there. If you guys want to make your own one, feel free to make a copy of the Excel spreadsheet, fill it out, and send it my way. I'd love to see. And make your own tier lists and all the other good stuff. And yeah, so hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.